Get him committed to the insane as Warner Brothers and it's smoke. And I got Clint Eastwood. The name alone brings a certain chill. A cowboy hat, a squint, a one-liner that knocks you off your seat. He's not just a movie star, he is the moment. But for decades, fans have been asking, what about Charles Bronson? The silent, no-nonsense action man with a stare that could freeze time? People often compare the two. Same era, same tough guy vibe. But who truly stood taller in Hollywood's wild west of grit and guns? Well, Clint Eastwood finally broke his silence. And what he said might just surprise you. Join us as we take a look at both their journeys and find out why fans still debate who's the real king of cool and why Eastwood thinks Bronson may have had the edge in one surprising way. Big start for a big name. Clint Eastwood was born on May 31st, 1930, in San Francisco, California. He was a big baby, so big, in fact, that hospital nurses called him Samson. His parents were Ruth and Clinton Eastwood. They were living in Oakland's Lake Merritt area when Clint was born. Clint had one younger sister named Jean, born in 1934. His family had roots from England, Ireland, Scotland, and the Netherlands. And he was even a descendant of William Bradford, one of the early pilgrims who came on the Mayflower. That made Clint part of the 12th generation born in North America. In the 1930s, his family moved around a few times as his dad changed jobs. But once they settled in Piedmont, California, things became more stable. No need for all that. All what? If you want to get acquainted, why don't you just say so? They lived in a wealthy neighborhood with a swimming pool and country club membership. His dad worked at Georgia Pacific as a manufacturing executive, and his mom took a job at IBM as a clerk once the kids got older. But Clint wasn't always the best student. He went to Piedmont Middle School and had to repeat a grade because of low scores. In high school, things got worse. At Piedmont High, he was asked to leave for writing something rude about a school official and burning an effigy on the school lawn. He later joined Oakland Technical High School and graduated in early 1949. Before fame, Clint worked all kinds of jobs: lifeguard, paperboy, grocery clerk, and even a forest firefighter. He also caddied for golfers. In 1951, he planned to go to Seattle University. But before that could happen, he got drafted into the U.S. Army during the Korean War. Now, here's where the story takes a wild turn. A crash that changed everything. While Clint was in the Army, something unexpected happened. He was dating a girl whose dad was a Fort Ord officer. That connection might have helped him stay safe during his service. But one day, while returning from a trip to Seattle, Clint was a passenger in a military plane, a Douglas AD bomber. The plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean near Point Reyes. Clint and the pilot were lucky to survive. They used a life raft and swam about 2 miles to safety. It was a close call, one that could have ended his story before it even began. But Clint made it through and was discharged from the Army in February 1953. That crash might have been terrifying, but it didn't stop him. In fact, it may have pushed him closer to Hollywood. One day at Fort Ord, a film crew was working nearby. A crew member spotted Clint and invited him to meet a director. Though this version is debated, Clint's biography says it was a man named Chuck Hill, someone Clint knew, and who helped sneak him into a studio in Los Angeles. There, Clint met cameraman Irving Glassberg, who later set up an audition with director Arthur Lubin. Lubin didn't think Clint could act. He was quite amateurish, Lubin once said, but he liked Clint's looks and told him to take acting classes. That was enough to land Clint his first studio contract in 1954 for just $100 a week. That first step opened the door, but the real work was only beginning. A rough beginning in Hollywood. At first, Clint had a hard time. People said he looked good, but his acting needed work. He spoke through his teeth and seemed stiff on camera, a style that later became part of his charm. Still, Directors weren't impressed in those early years. His first real audition was for Six Bridges to Cross in 1954, but he didn't get the part. He finally got a small role in Revenge of the Creature in 1955. Later that year, he appeared in Lady Godiva of Coventry and had another small part in Francis in the Navy as a sailor named Jonesy. He even showed up, uncredited, in Tarantula, playing a pilot. In those days, Clint was taking what he could get. He acted in Never Say Goodbye for just 4 hours. Then came another tiny role in Star in the Dust, where he played a ranch hand. He even dated Mamie Van Doren, one of the stars of that film. Television gave him his first real screen time. On July 2, 1955, Clint appeared on Allen in Movieland alongside Steve Allen, Tony Curtis, and Benny Goodman. But just a few months later, Universal dropped him. His contract ended on October 23, 1955. It looked like his acting dreams were over, but then came a new chance that would change his life forever. Years later, in 1963, Clint was still acting in Rawhide, a TV Western. But when his co-star Eric Fleming turned down a strange new offer to work on a low-budget film in Italy, Clint was next in line. That movie was a fistful of dollars, and it turned out to be a game-changer. The director was Sergio Leone, and the film was shot in Spain, far from Hollywood. It wasn't a big project. In fact, Clint only got paid $15,000 and a Mercedes-Benz for his work. But for Clint, the film was a chance to move away from his good guy image from Rawhide and try something new. He played a quiet, mysterious cowboy. He didn't even have a name in the movie, just a look, a gun, and a cigar. Even though Clint didn't smoke in real life, Leone made him puff cigars on screen. It became part of his character's tough image. The movie didn't look like the usual westerns from America. It was darker, grittier, and more violent. Clint wasn't saving the day with a smile. He was doing what needed to be done, even if it wasn't pretty. A Fistful of Dollars became a hit in Italy. That success brought 2 more films for a few dollars more, and The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly. These 3 movies became known as the Dollars Trilogy, and made Eastwood a star not just in Europe, but worldwide. For those who don't know the story, these 3 young Americans were in Paris or overseas in Europe on a trip. But Clint wasn't done just yet. Bigger films, bigger awards. Once he became famous, Clint started landing more roles. He worked on all kinds of films, westerns, action, war, and even love stories. His biggest box office hits were Every Which Way But Loose and its sequel, Any Which Way You Can. These movies showed Clint could make people laugh, not just stare them down. He also did more serious films like Hang 'Em High, The Outlaw Josie Wales, Escape from Alcatraz, Pale Rider, and Heartbreak Ridge. Each movie helped shape his tough, no-nonsense image. But then, Clint began showing another side of himself, behind the camera. In 1967, he created his own company, Malpaso Productions. Since then, almost all his films in the US were made under that name. And slowly, Clint Eastwood went from being just a star to being a respected director. In 1992, he directed and starred in Unforgiven, a dark western that showed what it really means to grow old in a violent world. That film won him 2 Academy Awards, one for Best Director and another for Best Picture. He did it again in 2004 with $1 Million Baby, a boxing drama that earned him the same 2 Oscars. Clint didn't stop there. He directed Mystic River, Letters from Iwo Jima, and even American Sniper. He told true stories, too, like Sully and Richard Jewell. In 2004, he directed Juror Hash 2, proving he's still got the drive, even in his 90s. He once said, "Sometimes you eat the process, sometimes the process eats you." That's Clint Eastwood in a nutshell. A man who never gave up, even when Hollywood said no. And through it all, he earned dozens of awards, including 4 Oscars and 4 Golden Globes. France even honored him with their highest awards. Italy gave him the Golden Lion for his life's work. But no matter how many awards he wins, Clint still carries that same stare, that same energy, and that same quiet strength that first caught everyone's attention way back at Fort Ord. And he's not the only one who left that kind of mark on Hollywood. There was another man, just as silent, just as fierce, and fans never stopped drawing the line between them. Why Eastwood and Bronson are always compared. Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson, 2 names that scream toughness. Over the years, fans have often compared them. Why? Because both actors played cold, quiet, and powerful characters. They were never the type to give long speeches. A look, a pause, and maybe a one-liner, that was enough. Eastwood gave us the man with no name and Dirty Harry. Bronson gave us Paul Kersey in Death Wish. These were men who didn't wait for justice. They created their own. They became symbols of a time when people wanted heroes who took control. Their acting style was simple, sharp, and silent. They used body language, not words. That became their trademark. While Eastwood later changed paths and became a top director, Bronson stayed in his lane. He remained the tough guy, the silent fighter, the one who didn't bend. This difference would shape how they were remembered. But fans still ask, who really did it better? Eastwood rarely talked about other actors, but there's no doubt he saw Bronson as a force. The New York Times once wrote, "Bronson looks like as if at any moment he's about to hit someone." That one line captured the energy Bronson carried in every film. But where did that fire come from? The hard life of Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson wasn't always a movie star. In fact, his early life was full of struggle. He was born Charles Bukinski on November 3, 1921, in Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania. His parents were Lithuanian immigrants. Bronson was the 11th of 15 children. His family lived in deep poverty. Their home was a small shack near the coal mines. It was so crowded that the kids had to sleep in shifts. They were that poor. Bronson once said he went to school wearing one of his sister's old dresses because there was nothing else to wear. At just 16, he joined the other miners. He worked first in the office, then down in the dark, dangerous pits. He earned $1 for every ton of coal he brought up. Some days he had to do double shifts to make that single dollar. Cave-ins were common, and the job was deadly. Bronson and his brother did dangerous tasks like removing stumps between mines. After his father died in 1933, things became even harder. There wasn't enough food or milk. Bronson remembered going hungry and said his baby sister had to drink tea instead of milk. Despite all this, he became the first in his family to finish high school, a small win in a tough world. His strong accent often made others think he was a foreigner. At home, English wasn't spoken. He grew up speaking Lithuanian and Russian, but even in the military, people thought he wasn't American-born. That didn't stop him from serving. During World War II, Bronson joined the U.S. Army Air Forces. He became a gunner in a B-29 bomber. He flew 25 missions and was even wounded in battle, earning a Purple Heart. From digging coal to flying missions, Bronson had already lived a lifetime of action before he ever stepped onto a movie set. Building a name in a changing Hollywood, after the war, Bronson didn't become a star overnight. He took whatever job he could find. At first, he worked with a theater group in Philadelphia, painting sets. That small backstage job opened a door to acting. He later moved to New York City and shared a small apartment with actor Jack Klugman. The two were both trying to break into showbiz. Bronson took acting classes at the Pasadena Playhouse in Hollywood, and in 1951, he landed his first film role, Sensei, though he wasn't even credited. At that time, he was still using his real name, Charles Bukinski. He appeared in You're in the Navy Now, The Mob, and The People Against O'Hara. He often played small roles or background characters, but in 1958, that changed. Bronson landed his first lead role in Machine Gun Kelly. That performance proved he could carry a film. More roles soon followed, but something else was happening in America. Senator Joe McCarthy had started a campaign against communism, and people with foreign-sounding names were being targeted. Bronson knew his real name might hold him back, so he changed it. Charles Buczynski became Charles Bronson. It was a smart move. With his new name and his tough face, he quickly became one of the most memorable men in Hollywood. But it wasn't until the 1960s that his career truly exploded. The roles that made him a legend. In the 1960s and 70s, Bronson hit his peak. He played strong supporting roles in big films like The Magnificent Seven and The Great Escape. He was also in The Dirty Dozen, and this property is condemned. These movies made him a household name. European filmmakers loved him. French actor Alain Delon was a fan and invited him to co-star in À deux l'ami in 1968. That same year, Bronson starred in the spaghetti western Once Upon a Time in the West, which became one of his most iconic roles. His face, his silence, and his cold stare were unforgettable. In Europe, he became the biggest American star. Audiences couldn't get enough of him. He starred in hit after hit: Rider on the Rain, The Mechanic, and The Stone Killer. Each role added to his tough guy image. By the early 1970s, he was the top box office draw in the world and was making $1 million per film. Then came Death Wish in 1974. The film told the story of an ordinary man who becomes a vigilante after his family is attacked. Critics didn't like it at first. They thought it was too violent, but audiences loved it. The movie was a huge hit and led to 4 sequels. For many fans, Death Wish became the defining role of Bronson's career. After that, he stuck mostly to action roles. He starred in Mr. Majestic, Hard Times, St. Ives, and Telephone, and Assassination. These films weren't always loved by critics, but they kept him in the spotlight. Later in his career, he worked more with director J. Lee Thompson. He also did some TV movies that were different from his usual roles, showing a softer or more dramatic side. Even in the 1990s, Bronson kept working. One of his final performances came in The Indian Runner, a serious drama that earned praise from critics. Even as his career slowed down, Bronson proved he could still surprise audiences with depth and power. But years earlier, a simple choice he made would end up shaping someone else's entire careers. The role that almost went to Bronson. Before Clint Eastwood became the face of Western films, someone else almost took his place. That someone was Charles Bronson. When Italian director Sergio Leone began working on A Fistful of Dollars, he had a specific idea in mind. He wanted a tough, quiet man to play the lead. The man with no name. Leone's first choice wasn't Clint Eastwood. It was Bronson. Bronson read the script and didn't like it. He said no. He thought it was terrible. That decision changed film history. After Bronson passed, Leone offered the role to Clint Eastwood. And that simple switch opened the door to Clint's entire movie career. But that wasn't the only time Bronson turned down Leone. Later, the director offered him the part of Angel Eyes, the cruel gunslinger in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Again, Bronson had to say no. This time, because he was already busy filming The Dirty Dozen. That role went to Lee Van Cleef, who made it unforgettable. Even with these missed chances, Bronson and Leone did work together, and when they finally did, it became one of Bronson's most powerful performances ever, the epic that brought them together. In 1968, Sergio Leone brought Bronson back into his world with Once Upon a Time in the West. This wasn't just another Western. It was a long, intense film filled with mood, silence, and unforgettable moments. And Bronson played a mysterious man known only as Harmonica. The film starts slow and quiet. 3 outlaws are waiting at a train station. It's hot, dusty, and tense. After 10 minutes of silence, Harmonica steps off the train. He's not there to talk. He's there for something bigger. But instead of the man he expected, he sees 3 gunslingers. They look at him. He looks at them. One of them says, "We're shy 1 horse." Bronson's harmonica calmly shakes his head and replies, "You brought 2 too many." Then, without hesitation, he opens fire. That line, just 5 words, has become one of the greatest in Western movie history. It was cool, it was sharp, and it was terrifying in its simplicity. Bronson didn't shout. He didn't show anger. He just let them know, in the coldest way possible, that not all of them would leave alive. That scene set the tone for the entire film and made Harmonica one of the most dangerous characters ever seen on screen. And what's more, it reminded everyone that Bronson didn't need many words to make his point. The one-liner that beat the best. Fans often say Clint Eastwood is the king of Western one-liners. Lines like, "Go ahead, make my day," and "Do you feel lucky?" are still famous today. But some people believe that Bronson gave the best Western line of all time, and it was in Once Upon a Time in the West. The moment Harmonica says, "You brought 2 too many," is simple but powerful. He doesn't explain. He doesn't brag. He just lets the line hang in the air before the shooting starts. What made it even more chilling was how Bronson delivered it. He sounded calm, almost bored, like he wasn't even worried. And that's what made it so scary. You could feel that this man had been through worse, and he wasn't afraid of anything. He had a suitcase in one hand and a harmonica in the other. But he stood there like a wall. That one line gave the audience all the warning they needed. This man is dangerous. Some fans say this moment proves that while Eastwood may have had more iconic quotes, Bronson had the best one-liner in all of Western film history. And this scene wasn't just about the words. It was about timing, silence, and energy. All things Bronson mastered with ease. Eastwood had more, but Bronson had the best. Clint Eastwood gave us many great one-liners. His characters always had something sharp to say before or after pulling the trigger. In A Fistful of Dollars, he says, "Build 3 coffins. In the good, the bad, and the ugly," he growls, "There's 2 kinds of people in the world, my friend. Those with loaded guns and those who dig, you dig." His lines are legendary, no question. But what made Bronson's line different was how quiet and controlled it was. Eastwood's lines are powerful, but they often come after we've seen his character in action for a while. With Bronson, that wasn't the case. In Once Upon a Time in the West, "You brought 2 too many" is only his 3rd line in the entire movie. He's barely said anything at all, and yet he owns the screen. His voice is calm, his face is unreadable, and the threat behind his words is clear as day. Even though director Sergio Leone first wanted Eastwood for the role, ending up with Bronson wasn't a step down. It was perfect casting. Bronson's tired eyes, silent nature, and harmonica-playing presence made him unforgettable. One note from that harmonica was all it took to let people know danger had arrived. What really makes Bronson's line so powerful isn't just his delivery. It's how the entire scene was put together. Once Upon a Time in the West doesn't rush. The opening is slow and quiet. It builds tension for almost 10 full minutes before Bronson even appears. You feel the heat, the flies, the boredom of the men waiting. And then suddenly harmonica is there. The way he walks in, the way he stands, and the way he speaks. Everything was carefully planned. The harmonica playing in the background adds a haunting touch. The silence before the shootout makes his line feel even sharper. And the camera stays on Bronson just long enough for the audience to feel the weight of what he's saying. It wasn't just Bronson who made the moment great. Director Sergio Leone and co-writer Sergio Donati helped shape it perfectly. Every second of that scene leads to the line, and once Bronson says it, the action explodes. That's why this one-liner beats all the others. Not just because of the words, but because of the scene built around it. Everything worked together. The writing, the acting, the music, and the silence. Even fans who love Eastwood admit that while he has more one-liners, Bronson's is the best. And when you see that scene, you understand exactly why. Speaking of which, it's easy to forget that Clint Eastwood wasn't always the top pick for a fistful of dollars. When Sergio Leone began casting, Clint wasn't on anyone's mind. He was still best known for his role in Rawhide, a TV show. Many directors didn't see him as a movie star yet. Eastwood's role that almost never was. Leone tried to get bigger names. He wanted Henry Fonda, but Fonda said no. He asked James Coburn, but Coburn was too expensive. Even other lesser-known actors turned him down. Bronson was one of them. Leone said later, "I really wanted James Coburn, but when that didn't work out, he kept going down the list. Finally, he landed on Eastwood, a choice made not out of excitement, but because nobody else wanted the job. Even Steve Reeves, the famous bodybuilder, turned it down. He later said, "I wouldn't have felt real good smoking a little cigar and squinting my eyes for 3 months." He didn't believe the movie would work, so he passed. But that little film turned out to be a huge success. So in a way, Clint Eastwood became a star by accident. If Bronson or any of those other names had said yes, Clint may have never become the man with no name. It's wild to think about how one actor's rejection became another's big break. Final years and legacy of a silent giant. Charles Bronson retired in the late 1990s. After decades of playing strong, silent types, the action finally slowed down. He passed away on August 30th, 2003, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 81 years old. Many people thought he died of pneumonia or Alzheimer's, but his death certificate told a more complex story. It listed respiratory failure caused by metastatic lung cancer, along with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and congestive cardiomyopathy. In simple terms, Bronson's body had gone through a lot, and like many men of his generation, he kept much of his pain private. He was buried in Vermont, far from the spotlight of Hollywood, but his image lives on. Bronson never needed to shout to make a point. He could do more with one stare than most actors could do with a full monologue. That's why even today, fans still compare him to Clint Eastwood. And you see, even after all these years, people still talk about Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson. They were both strong, both quiet, and both had a powerful presence on screen. But they took very different paths. Eastwood grew into a filmmaker. He told deep stories and took on emotional, complex roles. He won Oscars and became one of Hollywood's greatest directors. But he started with the role that Bronson turned down and never forgot it. Bronson stayed true to his image. He kept playing tough, silent heroes. He didn't chase awards. He didn't change for critics. And that's what fans loved about him. So when people ask who's the ultimate Western tough guy, there's no easy answer. But one thing's clear. The comparison between Eastwood and Bronson isn't just about their roles. It's about the feeling they gave us. The silence that said more than words ever could. Who do you think had the stronger screen presence? Clint Eastwood or Charles Bronson? And which one-liner gave you chills the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.